Maybe you don't know.
This time to build. This time to build. Power. This time to build. Power. This time to build. Power. This time to build. Power.
What's up, everybody? I'm your host, Chris Hampton. Welcome to episode 59 of the Power Company Podcast, brought to you by PowerCompanyClimbing.com. You guys, I am exhausted. I feel like I've crisscrossed the country multiple times in the last couple of months. I largely feel that way because I have, and it's definitely wearing on me. But it's I can see an end in sight, and all of the events that we've been to, all of the workshops we've done have been a ton of fun. Just wrapped up 24 hours of Horseshoe Hell, which, as always, was ridiculous. So thanks everybody out there for making that what it was. And I'm just took all of our furniture from Cincinnati, drove a moving truck across to Lander, and we just unloaded that into the house this morning. So it's been a little bit of craziness. Going to start putting together a training space at the new place. We've got a giant garage that's going to be training, the machine shop, I think I'm going to call it. So I'm excited about that. And then I leave here in a few days from now. Leave again to go to Rocktoberfest, where I'll be emceeing again, one of my favorite events of the year. If you guys are coming, register online at rrgcc.org and you get a discount on your admission. So jump online and do that early. I'm also going to be doing a live podcast in the Red on Saturday, October 14th at 8 p.m. at Land of the Arches. Going to be doing a board meeting, so all the coaches are going to be there, Nate and Paul and Blake, and we're not exactly sure what we're going to discuss yet. I'm going to poll our Facebook community for that, and we'll have a topic for you by the next time this podcast goes out, so I'll let you know what that's going to be. And then October 27th through the 29th, I'm in Salt Lake for the Climb Strong Performance Coaching Seminar, where I'll be talking about growth mindset and how to put practice into your climbing training sessions. I think that's going to be a ton of fun. I'm really looking forward to working with the coaches out there. And you can sign up for that at climbstrong.com. And then November 14th and 7th through the 17th at Spire in Bozeman. So I'm definitely stoked to meet all the Montana climbers out there. We've got a pretty big contingency in Bozeman already. So I'm excited to get to come out and work with you guys. And again, that's November 14th through the 17th. And today I've got an episode that I recorded but did not participate in. I recorded this at Outdoor Retailer this year. Things were crazy hectic, so I was running around getting some sponsor things done and talking to other people. And Arno Ilgner was going to be talking with Alex Honnold, and I agreed to record that session for them because I knew it was going to be a great conversation, and it was. So Arno and his partner Jeff Lodas with the Warrior's Way sat down with Alex shortly after his Freerider solo to talk about the mental side of it and what went into that. And I think you're going to really enjoy it. So I'm going to let those guys take it away, and I'll see you on the other side.
Well, I found that by dealing with fears and dealing with my mind through climbing, it does make the rest of life a lot more manageable.
Instead of just finding out more about Alex and all of your pursuits, we're obviously interested in mental training because that's what we've been teaching a lot. And if there is any example of, being really mentally fit and focused, it'd be what you're doing. In other words, being in an extreme situation where you absolutely have to be focused.
Yeah.
And so digging into like your perspective of mental training and from our perspective, finding out more for the listener on how they could improve their mental game. For starters, like a really important part of mental training is commitment. And one thing really intrigued me about listening to your interviews, like particularly in some of the videos, is the time that you take to come to a commitment to a free solo. Could you speak something toward that?
I don't even know where to start. It's all like such big things. Because it's funny. When I was younger and starting to learn how to trad climb, I learned a lot about commitment from reading your book, actually, from the Rock Warrior's Way, with like, if you're going to do it, give it 100% or don't do it. But, basically like once you commit, like flip the switch and like engage, because before that I'd been trad climbing much more timidly, where I basically would like climb till I got scared and then try to fumble in a piece of gear and then like was kind of gripped the whole time. And then that gave me a lot more purposeful, like, okay, climb to a stance, place a piece, give it 100%, like, just be a little bit more either on or off, and if I'm not comfortable, don't do it. Or like, if I'm going to do it, really do it. And with free soloing though, I feel sort of the same way. Like if I'm not comfortable, then I'll put more preparation in or do whatever else. But then when it's time, then I give it the 100% for sure. But it's the like getting to that point of feeling comfortable. That's sort of like that's the long process.
Yeah, it's almost like 100% commitment to preparation. And what does that involve?
The mental preparation for me is like, months or potentially years of like thinking about a route and sort of envisioning it and like just fantasizing, imagining, whatever else, like running it over in your mind over and over and seeing if that seems scary or if that seems like a bad idea, or imagining what it would feel like, or just sort of, like letting it unfold in your mind. Certainly for Freerider, it took a long time to even think it was possible. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like for years I'd think about it and be like, that'd be so cool to do. But then when I actually thought about the nitty gritty of like doing it, I'd be like, that's fucked up. Like, I don't want to do that.
Yeah. Because from our perspective, we all have comfort zones. We have stress zone outside of that. And the way we grow our comfort zone is through experience. So part of your preparation is just a ton of free soloing to broaden that experience
I've talked about that a lot with like growing the comfort zone. I wonder if I also got that from your book, actually. I probably did.
When we approach mental training, we're looking at committing attention to thinking processes, so you can use the qualities of your mind to make sure that you're gathering information, making appropriate risk decisions, but then being able to set that aside and commit attention to action, like to the body. From what I understand, you did a lot of preparation for like Moonlight Buttress, but then maybe almost felt like when you went to Half Dome that much preparation was taking away from some of the challenge.
Yeah.
But then you found yourself a little bit over your head.
Yeah, for sure. No, that's a very good analysis of it. Yeah. Because with Moonlight, I prepared so much that I had it was all just perfect execution. I just had to go up there and do it. And it felt great when I did it. I felt super solid. Part of it though is just that the Half Dome, the wall is too big to just go up and work by yourself and like memorize in the same way. So I was like, well, I can't really work on it the same way. So instead I'm going to just like do it as like this adventurous experience. But then the adventurous experience turned out to be quite scary. Now I've kind of gone full spectrum because coming back to El Cap this year, even though it's an even bigger wall and even more complicated, I just like put the time in and like made it feel comfortable.
Exactly. And one thing that I think is really important in mental training is finding a way for it not just to work in climbing, but to bridge it to other areas of our lives. Like you have a nonprofit, you're in relationship or in and out of relationship, whatever the situation might be. And that's in a different kind of challenge for commitment, right? All right. So when you think about commitment, being able to commit in climbing, how does that translate to these other endeavors?
Actually, to me, the closest translation is with public speaking, actually, because I used to be so gripped with public speaking. And I feel like when you go in front of a crowd, it's sort of the same deal where you just have to flip the switch and just engage. And it's like, okay, it's time to commit. Because like you can't go in front of a crowd and kind of half-ass it with like, hey, I'm just here to chat a little bit. It's like terrible. You just have to go up there and own it and be like, hello, my name's Alex and I'm here to give you a show. And it's like, to me, that's probably the most concrete example of like translating climbing to other parts of my life.
In the normal cast, you talked about struggling to or being ready to bring the nonprofit into the world, having some doubts about its effectiveness or, other aspects of it. And, I'm just thinking like, mental training could address that too. When you come to a point of being like, I'm not good enough to do this thing, you do a process by which you make yourself
totally
good enough, or resolve those doubts, essentially, and it seems like you're at that point.
For sure. I'd have to think about it more to sort of see exactly where the doubts are, what exactly it is that makes me uncomfortable about it, and then address them. You're totally right that I should sort of apply that same process. But I just haven't. I've been putting too much effort into other things.
Absolutely.
A part of what really seems to get into the way of being mentally focused is like ego and things that keep us from being our authentic self. And when you describe like public speaking, you need to just own it and speak with authority and be genuine. And that seems so difficult for many people. I've struggled with that myself. So how do you access that without having, because people say that, well, you don't have a lot of ego and like you can be genuine and authentic. Is that something that's just been natural all your life, or did you have to develop that, or why isn't ego a bigger part?
I don't know. I don't even know. I've never even really thought about it. But when you talk about authentic self, I'm like always the same, basically, in interviews and film in life. Like I am me, like I'm just one version of me that's pretty much always the same. And I've changed over time. Obviously I've like learned and grown, and I'm like a better communicator now, and I'm like a kinder person than I was 10 years ago. But I pretty much always, like in any interview or anything, like whether it's, written or verbal or like in front of a camera or not, like I'm pretty much always the same. And I don't know. That's just the way I am. It's just...
Okay.
I don't know. And I've heard that people struggle with that when people are like on camera, they can't be normal or they can't be natural. Yeah. I'm like, I don't know. It's just not a thing for me. But I think from part of it, it's just easier to just be yourself, just to act totally normal all the time. Like, I don't, for me, it's hard to like put on like an act,
Exactly.
I don't know.
Totally.
Yeah, it's harder, but still, it's like when we develop our egos, it's like it feels threatened and fearful, for that image to be criticized.
Maybe I just have never really given a shit, like what people think or if I'm going to be criticized. I do care a little bit, like, I care about the opinion of my peers, and like I don't want to totally embarrass myself in some presentation in front of a group or something. But in general, like I don't really care if I get criticized for things. I'm like, as long as I feel comfortable with my decisions and, as long as I feel good about it, then I'm like, and maybe that's the ultimate example of ego, because as long as I feel good, then it's all good. Like I just care about the self, but I don't know. It's just, I don't know.
Okay. Do you, you've been said to be no big deal, Honnold. Like, why do you think that the free soloing that you do, which is a big deal, is not a big deal? And where does that come from? Is it humility or is it self-deprecation? And
well, I think it's partially just that. Bringing it back to Freerider again. Like, so I thought of this for years as the coolest thing that would ever be done. I'm like, this is the future of the sport. This is visionary. This is crazy. But then by the time I put in enough work to actually do it, it seemed totally normal. Like it was now within my comfort zone. It seems reasonable. It seems normal. And so then I do it, and now I'm like, oh, well, now it's normal. It's no longer the like craziest thing that's ever been done. But I think that's sort of the natural process of like, to make something possible, you like, or like once you have made something possible, it's no longer, by definition, it's no longer impossible.
Yeah, it's no longer a big deal.
You've like taken it off the pedestal, and it's now just like a normal thing. But,
to address that issue of public speaking, like if you go up in front of a group of people and speak to something that is close to your heart that you know well, I think it's much less anxiety producing than if you go up there and try to talk out your ass.
Yeah, for sure,
right?
for sure.
So,
and I have the benefit of always talking about climbing, which, I've been deeply immersed in for 20 years. So It's super easy just to go up and talk about climbing.
Yeah. And, if you extend the analogy, like in terms of getting on a route that you maybe haven't prepared for properly,
for sure,
you're taking a risk in the same kind of way where you don't have the background. You don't have enough information to know whether or not you're going to be able to climb that route or say something intelligent.
Yeah, it's all about the preparation, for sure. So much of life is practice. Like you just need to practice.
And putting in the work.
Yeah.
Right.
For sure.
Fear does play a part in it, right? And you've mentioned in your book that you're fearful just like everybody else, but it seems like that preparation puts fear in its place so that action can be no big deal in a sense, because you're focused on just the execution. There's if you've done the preparation, then thinking process is going to be diminished, less chance to interfere, and you can focus just on the execution of engaging your body. And so you mentioned about mental armor as being...
Though I actually don't really think of it in those terms anymore.
No more?
Yeah, it's funny because the whole mental armor, like the shield type thing, was sort of something I thought about more as when I was younger. And like, I wrote about that in my book with the chapter about Half Dome.
Right.
Now I actually prefer not to like think of it as a shield. I prefer to think of like expanding my comfort zone until it does feel comfortable. You know, because the problem with like having a shield is that like as soon as your shield cracks, then you're kind of hosed, you know? I would prefer to be like totally comfortable with the whole situation all the way through and not have to like boost myself up for it somehow, you know, just like go up there when it feels natural. But
I think that's an important evolution to make, because like, what do you do if that cracks? It's like, if you're on a long solo like that, it's going to be a lot of time to pay attention, a lot of stress that builds, and then all of a sudden...
the thing about building up a shield or something like that is it kind of makes sense if you're like a skier maybe and you're going to huck some big cliff and that's it. You just have to like go once, stick the landing, and you're done. But with climbing, if you're trying to stay in the zone for 4 hours, you can't just like build yourself up. And I mean, or even if you're like soloing a sport route or something, you could like listen to a bunch of angry music, get all fired up, and then bust it out before you get scared, you know, because you're like, I have 5 minutes of overwhelming stoke, I just need to use it. But like if you're trying to solo a 3,000 foot wall, like you can't just like artificially boost yourself up. You have to like feel deeply comfortable with it.
And do you listen to music anymore? Like you said,
no, on El Cap I listened to music the whole way.
The whole way, totally chilling. Even through the cruxes.
I think I turned it down through the cruxes, so I like couldn't really hear anything. But partially though, that's as a timepiece, because I keep tracking my pace that way and have a sense of how long I'm spending on each pitch and things like that.
What music did you listen to?
I was just like shuffling this playlist of like rock that I like. It's just
so it's more like music.
It's all in upper.
That would get you fired up.
Yeah, totally. But that's actually all I listen to in general. I only listen to music that's like raw. You know, but that's but that's also just because that's what I listened to in high school and I just like it. You know,
totally. And that makes sense, because you know you're generally known to be a fairly even-keeled type of person, and you might need a little bit of like
a little dose of something to like fire me up.
Go.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, the only music I listen to is like, let's get some. You know, because I'm like, I want to get fired up. I want to do some stuff.
At the same time, at least in your book, you're pointing out that when the climbing got a little more serious, you turn it down or turn it off.
Yeah, it's funny. I'm also the same way with like layers, like having clothing on and stuff. When I get to like hard or like really serious climbing, I want like nothing on me. I want no noise. I want to be like naked on a wall, just like trying my hardest. You know, and I don't like people watching. I don't know. Like for me to like try really hard, I like to be alone and just like focused. I don't know.
Yeah, but that speaks toward everything is a distraction unless you just bring it back to the body and the execution of the climbing, right?
Totally.
And that's one thing that seems to pop up a lot for people that want to do mental training is they use tricks like listening to music or even thinking positive that can actually interfere or distract attention from what you're actually doing with the body to execute the movements.
No, I totally hear that.
What about motivation? You know, obviously there are two basic types of motivation, more intrinsic and extrinsic. Extrinsic is like have a goal, work toward that, kind of a vision for what you want to do. But intrinsic is like wanting to be in that stressor of the experience rather than just at the achievement. How do those play into giving you a vision and then also keeping you present during the difficult climbing?
I feel I mean, I don't know. I've never thought about it that much. And actually, I didn't know it was quite defined that way. I thought of extrinsic as more like motivated by external factors like, you know, sponsorship or something. It is kind of like
that because that goal is kind of out there, like El Cap or whatever. It's like an external motivator that can give you a vision to work toward.
I mean, half of it was like, I just want to solo El Cap because I'm like, I think that's the coolest thing ever done. But then also when I thought about it, like the idea of like hanging from finger locks 2,600 feet off the ground, you know, like just sounds amazing. You know, like it's the most outrageous position on earth. Like just to be able to like dangle from those holds and feel comfortable is like so crazy. And I was like, I want to be the dude that's like hanging on those holds, being like, this is so cool, you know? So, I mean, I suppose that's the intrinsic motivation of like just wanting to feel good on the wall. But so, I mean, I was definitely the sort of half and half, because I mean, there was definitely some extrinsic motivation. I was like, I want to be the person that solos El Cap. Like, that's cool.
So what about the timing of those motivations? Like when you were climbing, did you think about, I want to solo El Cap, or were you thinking I want to be hanging off these locks right here?
While I was climbing, it's all about the like, this feels amazing. Like this is I had a pitch near the top where, as I was climbing the Scotty Burke off with, I was like, this is the best this pitch has ever been climbed. And then I was like, humility, deep breaths, like relax, you know, just like, you know, like don't get carried away and then like blow a foot and fall off, you know. But like as I was climbing it, I was like, this pitch has never been climbed better than I'm climbing right now. I was like, I'm going so fast and I feel so good. And I was like, this is fucking awesome. You know, like I feel amazing. I mean, you know, I suppose that's sort of the intrinsic, you know, just like, this feels great, and like what a position. Obviously it's intrinsic. It's like you want to be in that experience. And I think it's something that's so many climbers struggle with, because we have a tendency to climb to be done climbing, you know, to totally.
achievement.
Certainly anything I've ever done alpine climbing is like totally extrinsic, you know, where you're like, I just want to say that I went to Alaska and climbed something. But then the reality is the whole time you're there, you're like, it's cold and it sucks. Like, why are we here? You know? Yeah. Like all of alpinism, I think, is extrinsically motivated.
I think there's, for some people, they do enjoy that suffering.
Well, totally. Like I'm really good friends with Colin Haley, and he's motivated for alpine climbing the way I am for rock climbing. And like he loves to just like hike into the mountains and like do that stuff. And I'm just like, man, how are you so fired up? But it's just like, and it's interesting hanging out with him, because I'm like, our motivations are like, we're really, really similar people, but he just cares about the mountains in the way that I care about cliffs. And I'm just like, all right, you know.
Yeah, but you've also done some of that in Patagonia, right?
Yeah, totally.
We don't have to dig into this question a lot, but and probably can't, you know, really to the satisfaction of the listeners. But why is free soloing appealing? I mean, that's very personal for everyone that does it, but most of the listeners are going to say, well, you're crazy to do that. Yet it's a very personal decision, and with all the preparation that you do, you know, it can be no big deal in a sense, because the confidence that comes from that preparation has prepared you for being able to take that risk.
Yeah, so what do you mean though? Like
why free soloing for you? Now, I know in your book you said because you were shy and you didn't want to ask.
Yeah, that's just kind of like the superficial thing to start though. But I mean, before that was the aesthetic appeal. You know, like seeing a picture of Peter Croft on the rostrum in his white painter pants as a kid. I'm like, that guy is rad. Like, what an amazing position. What a crazy place to be. I just always thought it was cool, you know, like, but part of that's just cultural too, like growing up in California and being like immersed with stories of the Stone Masters in Yosemite and Joshua Tree. And like, there's just such a big thing around it. You know, like maybe if I'd grown up in Europe, I would have been more into sport climbing or whatever. But it's partially just where I was from and like how I grew up. I was just like, that is awesome.
Yeah. And I think Tommy Caldwell said once, just find your niche and do the best you can in it, you know. So we're all kind of drawn toward different disciplines within climbing. Could be, you know, big wall free climbing, or it could be free soloing. It could be sport climbing. And so that's again intrinsic motivation, finding out what's appropriate for you and for me, and then following through with that. From inside out, being drawn toward whatever that activity is.
Yeah, bringing it back to El Cap again, which is sorry, I keep doing it, but it is interesting because for years I was sort of like I shouldn't try to solo El Cap unless I become a stronger climber. Like I should climb 9A or like climb 14D or 15A or something before I try to take on a challenge like that. And I always sort of felt like I should be a different kind of climber, which is sort of the like, I feel like I should be stronger. But then at a certain point, sort of like in the last year and a half, I was just like, you know what, like if I might never climb 515. I don't really know. But I was kind of like, whether I ever do or don't, it doesn't really change the fact that I can feel comfortable soloing 12 plus. And I was like, I may as well just focus on like what I like to do and what I can do and just like work on that, like play to my strengths rather than like try to turn myself into some other climber and then come back to it.
Right.
You know, and so ultimately I just worked on El Cap anyway and did it, even though I still can't climb that hard, I'm still like climbing 14A or B or something. I'm like, man, I wish I could climb harder, but I'm like, the reality is that I like doing a lot of volume, so I'm like, I may as well just like work on El Cap,
What the core point in our Warriors Way approach to mental training is attention. And attention can be used very differently when you're in a thinking process as opposed to a decision-making process and then an action process. So, for an example, attention can be in thinking, gathering information very analytically, right? But then when you make a decision, it's more feeling-based, more intuitive-based, and that kind of ties into what I've heard you say a lot about I'm not feeling it right now. It's like tuning in internally to what's going to be appropriate for you as opposed to being influenced externally by other people. Is that how you find, especially in free solo, and how you make decisions about whether to go on or not?
I feel like free soloing is 100% internal. It doesn't matter how much other people tell you to do something. If it fills you with dread to think about soloing something, then for sure you're just not going to do it.
Right. And then, after all that preparation, making sure, tapping into that feeling-based intuition about an appropriate risk for free soloing. Then when you're actually engaged in execution, what is it like to have attention in that execution? What is that experience like for you? Like specifics.
I guess, to me, I normally describe that as the feeling of emptiness, I guess, because you're just executing. When you're talking about execution, you mean the actual physical act of climbing?
Yes, engaging your body.
Yeah, to me, when I'm climbing, when I'm doing difficult climbing and I'm fully committed to it, I feel like empty. It's just my body doing the moves. I'm not thinking about anything. I'm not, there's like nothing going on basically. It's just my mind is blank and I'm just performing. In a lot of ways, that's like the ideal state for climbing. That's kind of what I'm aspiring for.
It's like being in the zone, right? Or being in flow,
that is the zone, I guess. Right?
And so, in other words, being engaged in thinking while you're executing interrupts that flow or being in the zone. So
you don't want to be
means you're empty. Attention is empty, out of the mind.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Specifically thinking about the crux on Freerider, the hardest 12 moves. This little boulder problem, there was definitely no thought. I just did it exactly the way I always do it on a mini traction. Like when I'm working it with a rope, I just did it exactly the same. There was no like, oh, is that foot right? And this hand feels a certain way. I just did it. It was like pretty amazing.
When people hear the word empty, they often think nothing, right? My version of feeling empty is feeling full, actually, in terms of sensory experience. Being open to the feeling, the sound, the texture. Is that something that you can connect with?
No, I feel sort of the opposite about it. Because I don't know. Because I'm not like thinking about the texture, registering. I'm definitely not hearing any sounds. I'm definitely not, like if there were birds behind me, I wouldn't know. I'm just like freaking doing it. And actually, I've had that experience on the Gritstone in the UK. I red pointed this E7 or E8 or something. It's like a 12 plus slab with no protection. And it culminates in this like hard dead point to this hole, like really small holes, and you basically jump to the end. And as I was doing it, there was a photographer taking some pictures, and there were a bunch of people like hanging out watching. And I stuck the final hold. It's like big move. I like built up, like did the move and stuck it. And then I sort of like came back to my senses. I was like out of the zone again and sort of looked around. I was like, where'd everybody go? And like, why'd the photographer stop taking pictures? And it turns out this guy had fallen just around the corner from me and like compound fractured his femur. And there was like this dude like screaming around the corner who just had this terrible accident. Never noticed it, didn't hear it. Like I just did my route like without realizing that like the crowd had like run away to go help this guy. And then like as soon as I finished the route, we all went over and like helped carry him out to a helicopter. It's totally crazy. But I was like, wow, I did not hear somebody like scream, breaking his leg like right next to me while I was doing, and it is like kind of an example of like my mind just totally shutting down to some extent because I'm just like executing.
And shutting down certain senses.
Yeah, exactly.
Thinking, hearing, all the unnecessary
in order to
stuff.
heighten other senses.
Exactly.
Which
and
is
what are
freaking
those?
Pulling down on your freaking fingertips as hard as you can.
It's feeling in your touch, in your fingertips.
No, it's not your touch. It's like just the execution, just the like doing the movements properly, like weighting your feet. Yeah, exactly. Like staying balanced, keeping your body in a good position, like holding things but not too tightly, you know what I mean? Like being strong but not over gripping. Like I don't know.
And that's all feeling based and sensory. Really.
Yeah, for sure. But I mean, knowing how hard you have to hold a hold to stay on it, but not so hard that you're getting more pumped than you need to. I mean, that's like, how do you quantify that? You're just like, I don't know. I just like, I'm holding it just right.
Really in the moment without thinking. Yeah. That's how you quantify it.
You know, what you're describing is like getting into the flow state, right? The zone. And it's something that athletes talk about. It's, they love it when they're in it, but they don't know how to replicate it. How are you replicating it?
Am I replicating it? I don't know.
I think, well, if you, I would think you would be if you're on a free solo that's 4 hours long.
I don't know.
There's some intentionality there, that something you're actually doing that leads you into the flow state more intentionally rather than haphazardly.
I don't know. Honestly, I mean, the thing for me about entering the flow state or something is partially it's just because, or it happens when it's required to happen, like when you have to. And the thing with like a 4-hour free solo is like on the easy terrain, you can think about whatever you want to, but then pretty soon you get to hard climbing again, and then you just have to re-engage,
It's like an absorbed flow state because of the situation.
Yeah, and so it's not as if I'm like consciously flipping a switch on and off. It's more just that like as I get to hard stuff, you just like have to pay attention again.
Right. But a lot of climbers, they have to pay attention, but then they get distracted anyway.
Well, I don't even know, like, what's wrong with them?
Well, that's what mental training is all about, is like how to...
No, I'm probably the same way, though. I mean, when I'm trying to red point a hard sport route, it's like something I care about, but you're not necessarily 100% in it. I can still occasionally be like, oh, I didn't grab that hold quite right, and I just like didn't really know, and then I sort of fell off, and then you kind of know that you didn't give it 100% effort, but you're like... Well, I mean, I don't know. And then you make up random excuses with like, well, it didn't feel right. And you're like, yeah, but you didn't quite give it the 100% either.
Right.
But with soloing, it's like you always give it the 100% because you're going to freaking die. So.
Well, that kind of brings up like no fall, yes fall zones. Like, do you have challenges when going from being in like no fall zones in free soloing when you go into like rope climbing or like
climbing? Though actually even in soloing there are no fall and yes fall zones. I mean, so interestingly, soloing half dome, the crux of the Higbee Hedral, there's a 12A boulder prom at the bottom. It's a total yes fall zone. It's like above this picnic table sized ledge. If you fell off it, you would like probably be totally fine. And so, I mean, you think about soloing half dome as like, oh, it's totally outrageous. And I mean, there are the vast majority, if you fell off, you're going to die. But I mean, the hardest boulder prom on the whole route is right above a ledge. And like when I saw it at Astroman the first time, the 11C boulder prom is above this like sloping ledge with a big hand crack behind it. So I always felt like if I fell off, I might be able to just snag the hand crack as I hit the ledge because it's not that high. I don't know if that's realistic or not, but in the back of my mind, I was sort of like, oh, you might be able to self-arrest. And so, I mean, I definitely think about that with soloing, where it's like there are areas where if you fall, you're for sure going to die instantly. And then there's some areas where you're like, oh, it might be okay, And I mean, I sort of evaluate the fall, the consequences, like whether I'm roped up or not,
So when you go to sport climbing, where you're in yes fall zones because of how it's bolted and so forth, no problem staying committed, pushing through doubts and taking the falls, or...
Well, actually, I sort of probably have the opposite problem where it's hard for me to get out of my like overly controlled soloing style of climbing when I switch back to like right now I'm trying to get back into like hard bouldering, hard sport climbing, like try to be strong again. But part of that means giving up a degree of control and just like going to the death, being like right on that edge where you're like, you honestly don't know if you're going to stick the move or not, but you just try your hardest anyway. And I find it's hard for me to like just try that hard, because I'm so used to doing things with like a degree of reserve and like a certain precision and control. Like I don't like to feel wildly out of control. And so for me to sport climb harder, a big part of it is like relearning how to like be explosive and be bolder and like jump for things and like hope that I hold on. And like, you just never know. You're like, maybe I will, maybe I won't.
And it's like, so we all can get like really great at a certain type of climbing, but then there's a downside when we go to another discipline.
Totally.
But then it takes practice again, and then...
and in theory, the more you switch back and forth, the easier it is to transition between them and to be able to flip that switch.
Right. Do you do any like morning practices or some sort of practices for your mind, like anything from yoga to Tai Chi or meditation or things like that? And if you do they help?
No, I've never really done any kind of specific mental thing. Mm-hmm. Though over the last year, I've been better about like doing stretching every day. I mean, that's basically just for my body, you know, to keep things supple and stay flexible. But I have found that spending 10 minutes, you know, by myself or like listening to music, sort of like gently stretching is sort of a nice, I wouldn't say it's meditative, but you know, it's a nice way to like reflect on things and like have a moment to myself. But no, I've never like intentionally done any kind of mental training like that.
That one neuroscientist that put you in a functional MRI showed you a bunch of scary images. Would you talk a little bit about your interpretation of the meaning of those results?
Yeah, so I mean, basically, it was a feature article on Nautilus magazine that sort of found that my amygdala didn't activate under stimulus. The stimulus being, you know, exciting images in an MRI.
Yeah.
I sort of found that to mean. I mean, so then the question is that like nature or nurture? Like, do I just not have an amygdala? I mean, I do physically have one, but does it not work? Or did it stop working because I've like slowly bludgeoned it to death through like years of souling?
Training.
Yeah, well, I prefer to think of it as stepping on my amygdala over and over and grinding it into dust with the heel of my boot. But no, I mean, I bet the reality is sort of half and half. That like I was probably less sensitive. You know, I bet my amygdala when I was born was already a little bit shriveled and a little bit tired and just like not quite as responsive as maybe the average amygdala. And then through 10 years of consistently pushing myself as a soloist, I think my amygdala just gave up and died. You know, now it's done.
Either that or you still have the same amygdala, maybe a little bit less sensitive than the average person, but you've done a lot of practice and have experiences to develop your rational brain to help keep it in check in a sense.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think that's basically the case because I know that 10 years ago I was a lot more afraid of different things and now I'm like much more calm. Mm-hmm. But you know, when you're looking at a picture of something, I'm like, why would you ever be afraid of a picture? I'm like, who cares?
So can you speak to to what that process looked like in your experience? Like how to...
In the MRI?
No, in those 10 years
desensitizing
of
myself.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know. I mean, it's just, you know, for me, it's all unfolded through the course of soloing. So like, I'm sure you could learn the same lessons through any other sport or through any other process, but for me, it was all through soloing. And that basically just meant starting on easy routes that seemed totally exciting. I mean, when I started soloing, I thought that, you know, it was all about perfection. Like if you made any mistake, you would die. And then over the years, I sort of realized that that's not totally the case. I mean, you can slip a little, you know, you can like blow a foot, you can like have rocks fall off. As long as you don't fall off yourself, then it's like, okay, it doesn't have to be like 100% perfect. It just has to be, you know, 97% perfect. And so sort of working through that experience, you know, just like having more and more of those sorts of things happen and like broadening my comfort zone soloing, it's just been a long process.
Yeah.
I mean, I've soloed so many pitches, you know, like so many easy pitches.
You know, taking climbing as a training for the mind and then applying it to something else. Do you find that this skill that you've developed helps you in other areas of your life?
Well, I found that by dealing with fears and dealing with my mind through climbing, it does make the rest of life a lot more manageable. Like certainly the anxiety that people feel associated with traveling, I don't really get that much. You know, like I'm never like afraid on planes. Like I feel like it just keeps life in perspective. Yeah. You know, you're just like, I'm pretty unstressed about things. I'm like, well, if you're not going to die, like what is there to be stressed about?
And motivation, you know, can shift from one discipline to another. Like after an achievement like El Cap, you know, it's not just what's the next bigger free solo. It could be, how about pushing myself on hard sport climbing?
Yeah, that's exactly what I'm hoping to do for sure.
Yeah. Do you see, as you go through your climbing life and your life in general, how your motivation can shift, you know, to new things and still be inspired by those new things?
I mean, I think even over the last 10 years that I've been soloing a whole lot, I mean, my motivation is frequently shifting throughout the year. Like now it's bouldering season, now it's sport climbing season, now it's, you know, big wall / soloing season. But, I mean, I think that's part of what I love about climbing so much is like that constantly shifting motivation. But,
Yeah, and that's again intrinsic, right? Because you're not asking somebody else, even though it might be bouldering season. Are you tuning into yourself about wanting to go bouldering?
Yeah, I mean, part of that also just has to do with the seasons. You know, you're like, oh, it's cold, like I want to go boulder, and then like, oh, it's really long days, I want to like use them and like climb big things. You know, it's just following the seasons, I guess. But
it could be seasonal based, what your friends are doing, but also what you feel inspired to do yourself.
Totally.
Yeah. What are some books that have influenced you? I mean, you already mentioned Rock
the Rock Warriors Way. I'll just keep plugging your book.
There are obviously other books out there, many books written on mental training.
Though I haven't actually read that many. I mean, I read The Rock Warriors Way like at an important juncture for me, you know, because it was when I was learning how to trad climb, and it was probably the first thing I read on the subject. And then I never actually got that into the whole subject. I mean, I've read a little bit about flow, like The Rise of Superman is like sort of a recent Stephen Kotler book. I read that because I was interviewed for it, so I was like in it, and he sent me a copy, and I was like, cool, and I read it. But in general, I think probably because this stuff has always come slightly naturally to me, I haven't like read a lot about fear. Though actually yesterday at the show, somebody gave me a book about fear and overcoming. I don't know, Kristen Ullman, I think her name is, like a big mountain skier from like the 90s. But anyway, so I'll probably read that. But she was like a former North Face athlete as well, so I was like, oh, that's cool. But I don't know. Most of my reading though is focused on like environmental nonfiction and stuff like that.
Being skilled in being mentally fit, being skilled in that department, like is there a part of you that like wants to know a little bit more specifically, like why you have that ability and what all leads to being able to be focused and mentally fit or in the flow?
No, I mean, honestly, I've never really cared that much. I mean, I think it's one of those things where like when you kind of have it, you don't really worry about it that much. Like I worry about physical training a lot more, and I've read more about how to get stronger, but it's because I'm not naturally strong. You know, like for me, it's really hard to be strong. And so I've like looked at a lot of different ways to try to get there, and like solicited opinions from tons of people, and like talked about coaching and training and all that type of stuff. I mean, I've put a lot of effort into physical training. I've put like almost no effort into mental training, but that's just because like I don't really feel like I have much to gain from more mental training.
So you're looking at where you're weak,
and
looking to build that up. Where it would be a natural person's response would be the opposite of that.
Yeah, I mean, well, I mean, somebody like Chris Sharma, I bet he's never read anything about training, you know, because he's like so physically gifted that he doesn't really need to. Like, he doesn't really care about like hanging on the hangboard or doing whatever else, because he's like, I can just go out and crush rocks to powder with my bare hands. You know, he's like, whatever. But that's just not me, you know. That's I don't know, everybody has different strengths.
Well, I think we all have a strong draw to our comfort zones, and it's helpful to be aware if we're just falling victim to that and not balancing out the aspect that could
you don't want to
make
play
us
to
a broader athlete.
Though it's funny because sometimes you play to your strengths. I mean, for me, soloing Freerider is playing to my strengths. You know what I mean? Like, that's
but
not
you have to balance out the physical part, you know, that can help complement your strength, right?
Wait, what do you mean?
Well, if free soloing Freerider is playing toward your strength, you're also looking at your weakness, which is physical training, and building that up so that it can complement you. So when you go and climb towards your strength, then you have this support.
No, I just meant that, you know, I'm all about balancing on weaknesses and like pursuing things in climbing that you're bad at so you can be more well-rounded. But at the same time, I feel like you're never really going to achieve anything like great in climbing unless you also play to the things that you're best at from time to time.
Right.
You know, I mean, that's why Chris Sharma has been like sport climbing and bouldering his whole career, because like, you know, I mean, he loves it, but that's also what he's amazing at. You know, and for me with soloing, I was kind of like, well, you know, this is something that I probably can do if I work towards it. I should just like do that rather than like beat my head against 14D, 15A for like years and still suck, you know. Like
it might be time for that now, right?
Well, yeah, now I'm stoked. Now I'm stoked. Yeah. Well, and honestly, those kinds of training goals lend themselves more towards like the work schedule I have now. You know, because I basically haven't done any kind of sponsor obligation or work in the last year because I've been focused on climbing and LCAP. And now that I have a lot more appearances and things, being able to train for 2 hours in the gym and do a hangboard workout is like much more appropriate. You know, and that's like kind of what it takes to climb 515. It's like slightly more intense, more focused training. It all sort of fits. You know, like I don't have the time to do like high volume endurance training right now anyway. So I'm like, well, you know, perfect. Good time to become a sport climber.
Anyway, that's all I had, really, and really appreciate sitting down with you, Alex.
Oh, no, thank you guys.
And digging into this topic is really interesting to us, and we'd like to see, share your perspective on it. So we really appreciate it.
No, thanks. I mean, I appreciate your guys' work too, since obviously I used your book so long ago. I mean, it's you have to start somewhere, and like that's where I learned when I was younger. So thanks for that.
So many people are inspired by what you do. I, for one, appreciate that inspiration.
Thanks.
Big thanks to Arno and Jeff and Alex for allowing me to repost this over here. It was fun to get to sit in on part of that conversation. Like I said, I was running around the Salt Palace and getting some things done, so I kind of dipped in and out. But it was really fun to listen to. And Alex and I actually had a meeting shortly after here in Lander to talk about his training, because like he mentioned in here, he wants to rebrand himself as an intensity athlete rather than an endurance athlete. And it was a really interesting conversation, to say the least. Alex isn't a whole lot different from most of us out there in his insecurities and in his challenges. He just happens to be at a much, much higher level on the endurance side of things and really understand himself in a way that a lot of people don't in that realm. But once he moves into the intensity sphere, he doesn't quite understand himself as well. So it was an interesting conversation, and I'm gonna be talking to Nate about that soon, and then give that conversation to our patrons. If you haven't checked out the Patreon site, please do. It's patreon.com/powercompanypodcast. For as little as $1 a month, you can get extra episodes and some other goodies over there. So please check that out. If you are coming to Rocktoberfest, come and find me. Register online. You get a discount, rrgcc.org. And live podcast there, board meeting, Saturday, October 14th, 8 p.m. at Land of the Arches. So if you happen to be around the Red, we would love to see you there for that recording. We're also going to have some question and answer afterward and just have a good time. October 27th to 29th, I'll be in Salt Lake City with the Climb Strong Performance Coaching Seminar. You can find out more about that at climbstrong.com. Then I'll be at Spire in Bozeman, November 14th to 17th. And hopefully I see you guys out there somewhere. I've been running around the country, so I've met a lot of you recently. And I appreciate everybody who comes up to me and lets me know that they love this thing and what we're doing. And, that keeps me going. So thank you guys for that. Take a look at what we've got on the website. Tons of new things are up. We're bringing out new things all the time. PowerCompanyClimbing.com. You can find us on the Facebook. You can find us on the Instagram. You can find us on the Pinterest. You cannot and will not ever find us on the Twitter, because we don't tweet. We scream like eagles.
It's time